Hi, I'm Brina. Thank you for joining me today on the Cozy Chaos podcast. Today, I'm going to tell the story of why I quit knitting and what got me back into it years later. Let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty, I hope you guys have had a good week. I have actually made so much progress this week in my knitting, so I feel like I have a lot more to show for myself than I did last week. Of course, we are talking about the Halibut Sweater here. That's my current project that I'm making with my friends, the current friendship sweater, if you will. I actually finished sleeve number 1 this week, so that was pretty big progress for me. So this is where we left off last week. I knit a few inches past that until I got to the length of sleeve that I was looking for. At that point, I tried it on to decide whether I wanted to do more of a straight sleeve construction like my friend had done, or if I wanted to do more of a balloon sleeve. At that point, basically, I had just knit in a tube straight across until I got to the length I liked. I decided to go for more of a balloon sleeve construction. I like the way it looks and it's pretty easy to accomplish. So you just knit in the tube until you get to the length you like. And then I did one whole row of just knit 2 together. So basically I decreased the sleeve stitch count by half. And then I switched to the smaller needles that I would use for my ribbing. And I just knit one row of stockinette after my decreased row just to kind of keep things tight. And then I just went ahead and did my 1x1 ribbing until I got to the cuff length that I liked. Lately, for projects that I want a real stretchy bind off, I've been using Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, which you can find on YouTube. Highly recommend. It basically is just a regular kind of 1x1 rib bind off with a yarn over built in, and that's what gives it the stretch. You can do it with other stitch patterns. Mine was just 1x1, so that's what I used. So after I got to the length that I wanted, I went ahead and picked up my stitches on the other sleeve here and got started. So this is about where the sleeve picked up at this stitch marker here, and I would say that I've gone like 5 or 6 inches maybe. I have a little bit longer to go until I get to the same length for this sleeve as I have for the other. I find that it's always hard to make a decision on the first sleeve, but once you get to the second, I just kind of match them up and take a look and see if we're at about the same length. So I don't really even count rows or anything anymore. So this is about where we're at. Probably another like 2 or 3 inches left of stockinette, and then I will just go ahead and repeat the same strategy that I did on this sleeve on the next sleeve. So yeah, I'm really proud of myself for how far I got this week. I will definitely be finished with the sweater next week by the time that we talk, so I'm excited about that. Right now, the sweater is pre-block, so typically when you block sweaters or get them wet to kind of even out the stitches, it does a lot for how the sweater drapes, which is great. I am a little nervous because currently it's pretty oversized, I would say. And typically when you block, at least with the kind of yarn that I'm using, the sweater will grow. It's just kind of part of the calculation process when you're deciding what size of sweater you want to make and what kind of yarn, that type of thing. My sweater certainly needs to be blocked in terms of the uniformity of the stitches. That's one of the best advantages of blocking, is that you get to have the stitches kind of even out and look better across the sweater. So I'm excited about that. That being said, my tension is just not even in terms of the contrast color and the main color. A lot of that is just due to this being the first time I've done a major color work wearable like this. So, it's all part of the learning process. I'm trying not to be like mad at myself about it, but I think the fit might be leaving a little bit to be desired. So we'll have to see. And kind of what I mean by that here, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see it on camera, but the blue is a lot looser than the pinky purple is here. Almost looks a little 3D, which is nice because I think it like makes the design pop a little bit more, but it's not really like intended, and I'm sure when it blocks it'll all kind of even out. So we're just going to need to see what happens with the fit. Stay tuned there for sure. So yeah, I'll definitely be able to finish sleeve number 2 by next week. Hopefully, I will also have time to block it as well. I'm excited to just hang out with my friends and all compare the sweaters that we made. Just kind of see how we all liked the project, talk about it, wear them together. I think it's so fun. And I'm so excited that every time I wear this sweater or like look at this sweater, I'm going to think about how I made it with my friends and like this time in my life. So I find that really kind of special and exciting. So I'm really pumped about about that. So once we all meet up together and compare our projects, I'll make sure to take video of that. And then the episode after we meet up, I will be sure to include the video there. So I'm really excited about it. And yes, this is a pretty exciting time. Almost done. We're getting there. I am going to make it to the finish line. So very excited about that. So now that I'm almost finished up with the Halibut Sweater project, I will get going on the Wrap Me Up sweater scarf that I am working on for my mom. I'm excited about that. It's pretty much going to be stockinette the whole way through from the point where I pick it up again. So I will, show that off next week for sure. So last weekend I had a 3-day weekend and I spent some of my Friday going around to different thrift stores, which I really like to do. It's really tempting to go every weekend, but I find that it kind of turns me off to thrifting actually because not too much has changed between one week and the next. So I try to go maybe once a month or so. And I found some really good stuff. I took videos while I was there, so I'm thinking I will make a thrift haul video at some point soon. Let me know if that's something you would be interested in down in the comments, please. So yeah, when I was thrifting, I found some really good stuff. I picked up some skeins of yarn, which I will talk about in my thrift haul video. And I also found like a candle holder. I found some cute fall decor and a tablecloth. So I'm excited to kind of like make my apartment look a little bit more ready for fall, which is exciting. Here in Houston, we actually had a couple of really nice days earlier this week. Monday and Tuesday, the humidity was really low, so it almost felt like fall, like my Kansas City fall that I love so much. It's supposed to be pretty warm and muggy again. Basically, it feels like summer for the next week or so. I'm hoping that we get some real honest to God fall weather sometime soon here. So please keep your fingers crossed for me. I make all of this knitwear all year long, and then I have to live in one of the hottest places in the country. I just really would like it to get chilly here soon, please, so that I can wear some of my hard work. Okay? Is that too much to ask? I feel like it shouldn't be. I feel like that's reasonable, but we'll see. One of the other major things I've been working on this week is sort of an around the house project, but my bathtub drain wasn't draining properly, and I had used Drano, I had like used a snake and like tried to do all the things that you're supposed to do, and it just like wouldn't drain right. It was really frustrating. I had to learn about the inside of like my integrated bathtub drain, which was really weird. And basically, I had to like get some fancy equipment to like help me get this stupid thing out because it was like rusted and corroded into the actual pipe and it was just stuck. And it was crazy. And I realized that this is like not about crafting at all, but it was a big part of my life this week. Okay. So I had to learn how to get this stupid rusty bell drain thing out of this stupid pipe. I ended up getting basically like an endoscopy scope, which is like the camera that they'll put like down people's throats if like they need to look and see what's up. So I got one of those that's like for the house, so it was like $30 on Amazon, and I had to like put it down my drain so I could see where it was so I could yank it up and everything, and it was just a huge mess. Finally I got that done, and now my bathtub drains beautifully and it's amazing. And I was like about to cry when I finally got this thing done because I could have called a plumber, but no, I figured that shit out by myself and I'm proud. That being said, it was a lot of work. I actually spent a lot of time on it, so I'm kind of impressed with myself for being able to have knit this much this week, given that I spent like several nights trying to figure out the stupid drain situation. So go me. The other thing that has been big for me in the last couple days, maybe since Wednesday this week, is a friend and I are starting a crafting club. So I'm really excited about that. We'd originally thought about making it for knitting and crochet, but then we just wanted to make sure it was like inclusive for everybody and whatever craft people are into. So I work at a company that works kind of in a community of other companies, and there are several thousand of us in that just like larger community. And they had a call for clubs to get started. And I looked at the website for the current clubs that were out there right now, and I'm like, none of these sound very interesting to me. I want to make a club that I would want to go to. Thus became the idea of our club. And I'm really excited about it. Turns out there are a lot of rules for setting up a club through this particular avenue. So there's like surprising amount of paperwork that I have to do, which I was not really planning on, but that is something that I'll be working on in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. And then maybe eventually I'll be able to kind of show myself like knitting at these club updates, and that could be a part of my like weekly update as well. I'm excited about that. I think it'll be fun. I know that there's like a market for it, I guess, and I think that it's just a really great way to bring people together and just kind of have like a little opportunity to have a little social outside of work. So I'm excited about that. I think that that's going to be really fun, and that has been kind of one of the more fun things I've had going on at work this week. So stay tuned for updates there. So this week on Current Obsessions, we've got a lot of TV and movie updates and not so much in terms of reading. So I'm going to go ahead and give a Sense and Sensibility update next week because I actually haven't really gotten very far in the book this week. Instead, I was sitting on the couch and just in the mood to watch some TV, and sometimes it's just like that. So I got a lot done with my Halibut Sweater, and while I was doing that, I want to talk about the things that I watched. The first thing that I watched was a documentary called Hurricane Katrina, Hell and High Water. It was a really well-made documentary, but also obviously the stories are so moving. So we talked to several victims of the hurricane, as well as like the people who were a part of running the city at that point and what they had done in the response effort. So we talked to a lot of the victims and we got to hear their individual stories, which is awesome. They also talked about like the mechanisms of how these things broke in order to cause so much flooding in the city. And not only did we hear from the victims, we also heard from people who were in the government and helping to coordinate the response effort. And I found it to be a very well made documentary. It's 3 episodes. I think I watched it on Netflix, and it is definitely well worth the watch. I think that personally, I enjoyed the first 2 episodes a little bit more than the third. The third felt a little bit stylistically different than the first two, which was interesting, but overall, great documentary. Highly recommend. The second documentary that I watched this week is called Unknown Number. It's pretty popular right now, so it's possible you might have seen it just kind of in your social media feeds, but it was really interesting. I don't want to give away the kind of plot twist in this one, but basically it's about a girl and her boyfriend who got cyberbullied by this unknown number that kept texting them. So I won't say who the like bad guy was in the documentary, but they were close with the victims and knew them personally and basically showed like no meaningful remorse for what they had done, which I just cannot imagine that. Let's say that what they were doing was a mistake. Like, you could have really hurt these kids, and they were so young. Like, I think they were like 14 or 15 at the time when the text started. I found that very difficult to watch and like believe that this person just like really did not feel bad for what they had done. So it was an interesting documentary. I think it was a good watch. It's not maybe one that I would watch again, but I did enjoy it. So I would recommend that one as well. So the next thing up in Current Obsessions is I was watching the end of the last season of Ginny in Georgia, which is on Netflix. It's sort of a small town drama series, but it's got kind of more like adult themes, and it's really pretty interesting. I really enjoy that show. I think that the actors are just brilliant. Like, the actors that they picked for this thing are so talented, and I recommend it to just about anybody. So if you think you might be interested in that, please go check it out. It's so good. Gotten about halfway through the latest season, so I basically picked up where I had left off and finished that latest season, and it was really good. Again, the acting is just beyond, so it was really moving from that perspective, and I just like really felt like I was there with those characters. It'll probably be like a year or so before the next season comes out, which is a bummer because I really liked this season, and of course I just want more right now, which is also a little bit crazy because some of these actors are kids, like they're young, and so I'm wondering how they're going to look like a year from now because they're like little kids, and are they still going to be little kids? Probably less little. So we'll have to see how that works out, but I'm excited. It's a very good show, and I'm glad that they're bringing it back for another season. So the last item for Current Obsessions this week is The Bear. So that is a TV series on Hulu about kind of the behind the scenes of running like a fancy restaurant and being a chef. It's a very good show. It's gotten a lot of hype, but I think it's well earned. The last season was very good, but it just kind of felt to me that the characters were all like mad at each other the whole season. Like, nobody felt like they were working on the same team. Everybody was like mad or upset or something at another person throughout basically the whole season. So I was a little nervous to start this next season now that it's been a couple months and that's come out, because I loved the first 2 seasons, and then the third season just kind of bummed me out, I'm going to be honest. So I was a little bit nervous about starting this next season, but so far it just feels much more upbeat. Like, we're on the same team again. Yeah, we made some mistakes, but we're working our way back out of it. It just feels more cohesive to me and just more like something I want to watch. Everything up to this point has been excellent TV. It's just the tone of last season was kind of a bummer. So I'm excited that things are looking up so far this season. One thing that I also noticed is I just felt like the music is great this season. Something about the scoring and the music choices I think are just like really working for the show right now. So I would say that like that's one of my favorite parts of this season so far. So if The Bear is something that you've considered watching and just haven't made your way around to yet, I would recommend it. Season 3 is a little rough, but if you can make your way through it, I think we'll be okay. I think I'll probably finish this show this week, so I'll probably need to find something good to watch while I get started on that Wrap Me Up Sweater Scarf, and I'm just working on stocking it forever. So if you have any recommendations for good shows or movies or even books, let me know down in the comments and I will see if I can check those out. All right, so for this week's Chaos Q, of course, we'll be starting with the Wrap Me Up Sweater Scarf as soon as the halibut is done. That's something we've talked about before, and we'll talk about it next week, so I won't get into that too much. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the thrifting haul YouTube video. So I believe that I will be working on that in the next week or so, and hopefully it'll be out pretty soon. The other thing I was thinking of is once I start the Wrap Me Up Sweater Scarf, I will have kind of a blank opening for my next knit project. And I was thinking about making a video kind of walking through how I actually plan for knit projects. So next, I think I probably want to make a patchwork sweater. And so I was thinking about just having a video where we kind of go through the general planning process as I'm picking which project I'm doing next. So let me know if that's something that would be interesting to you guys, because I think it might be kind of a fun video. All right, so now we're getting to the part of the video where I actually talk about why I had quit knitting. So I remember when I was an intern in college, I had taken a semester away from school to do this internship, and it was amazing because for the first time in years, I finally had time to myself. Because when I'm at school, I was at school and then I was home doing homework and then I was at work, and I just felt like I did not have free time to just relax ever, pretty much. So when I was an intern, I would go to work and then I would come home, and I didn't have to do homework and I didn't have to do school. So I had all of this free time that I had no idea what to do with. I took that opportunity to find hobbies that I would be interested in. And I don't know what drew me to knitting in particular. I think that it was just something I thought was cool, I guess. And so I went to probably like Joann's or something like that, and I picked up some straight needles and some just cheap crappy yarn. And I decided I'm going to teach myself how to knit. So I watched some YouTube videos, I figure it out. I make this teeny tiny little scarf that would not fit anyone, maybe a toddler. And it has like drop stitches in it. It has like crazy tension. It's just like basically a mess. I remember making it, being frustrated as I was doing it, and then I don't know, I didn't find the spark at that point. And then I went back to school, and I feel like the thought just like drifted away from my mind, and I did not think about knitting a single time until after I graduated. So after I graduated, I got a job. I'm done with school, and so once again, I have time to actually think for myself and do something that I enjoy just for the sake of enjoying it. And I got really into hand embroidery. That was my first kind of major crafting hobby, I would say. And that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. And then I wanted to try doing more things that I know I'm not good at. I found that I always just kind of strove for perfection on whatever I'm doing. And I don't think that's a bad quality necessarily, but it sort of like stops me from enjoying things that I'm just not good at. And so the thing that I always came back to is knitting. I did it, I was not good at it, and so I didn't enjoy it. And I wanted to do something that I know I'm not going to be good at and just have fun with it. So this time, I went back, I got different yarn, I got my needles, and I just kind of worked at it, and I made a scarf that was not good, but it was much better than the first scarf I had made. And then all of a sudden, like, knitting was my new thing. Knitting was my new hobby. I am all in on this now. I was still for a while juggling hand embroidery and knitting, but I think the thing that really sucked me into knitting so much is that I felt like it was not so visually demanding as hand embroidery was. Because I love the outcome, the finished objects for hand embroidery. I think they're great. But it takes so much precise, detailed work that I felt like I was like right here looking at the thing and just working on it all day. And it was really hard for me to like listen to something or watch something as I was working on it. Whereas when I'm knitting, you can do that thing where you're getting into a mindless state and you're watching or absorbing something else. But at the end of it, you have something beautiful that you can wear or give to somebody else. And it was amazing. So I think that quality is what really drew me into knitting as opposed to hand embroidery. And I still do some hand embroidery sometimes, but I definitely think that knitting is like my main fiber arts hobby, I would say. My return to knitting probably happened like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. So I've been pretty serious about knitting since then, and it's my number one fiber arts hobby. So that is my knitting origin story. But now we're going to go to Reddit and hear how other people got started with their knitting journey. All right, so I've got my handy dandy laptop here, and now we're going to start with our knitting origin stories off of Reddit. And this is on r/casual knitting. This person says, it was 2004 and I was working at Disneyland. My sister got me a knitting book for Christmas, so I brought it along with some needles and yarn to try during my lunch break at work. I worked with the characters, so I was in their break room trying my damnedest to cast on when an older woman in all of the Minnie Mouse costume, except for the head, walked over to me and said, "You don't know what you're doing." And I was like, "Nope, I do not." And she asked if she could teach me. And now 20 years later, I still tell people that Minnie Mouse taught me how to knit. That's amazing. What an iconic knitting story. There's one character in sort of like the main Mickey gang who knows how to knit. I fully think it would be Minnie. So this feels like absolutely in character for her. Although I kind of wonder how she was able to teach her if she had the hands on, because I don't even think that Minnie Mouse has 5 fingers. So I wonder, surely she took the silly gloves off to teach her, but I personally would prefer to imagine her with the giant gloves on and fumbling around with a knitting needle. So that's amazing. This other Redditor said that they learned how to knit because a little old lady at church offered to teach all the teenage girls to knit and nobody was interested. Aw. She felt bad, so she said yes, not expecting to like it, but just wanting to be nice. She loved it so much that she went to the lady's house to knit with her one afternoon every week until she graduated. Here she is 12 years later, and knitting is still her primary hobby. Every few months, she sends the lady an email with her pictures of her recent projects. I think that is so sweet. I think that it can be easy to think of knitting as a very personal hobby, and I think for a lot of us it is. I prefer stories where you talk about how knitting brings people together. I think that is so awesome. We talked last week about that Redditor who would knit the pearl rose for her son, so they would pass the projects back and forth. And I just think stories like that are so amazing, and I wish we had more. Another person says that she actually learned to knit while in therapy for an eating disorder. We were in group therapy, and one of the women pulled out some knitting, and we were all mesmerized. So the next session, the organizer brought us all knitting needles and thread, and we all learned how to knit. I recently watched a documentary program on eating disorder treatment, and they were also knitting. That is so amazing. Other people are saying that they learned to knit in group therapy or eating disorder clinics. I think it's really nice to have a hobby that gives you something at the end. There are a lot of hobbies where you're doing something and that's kind of it. Like even sports, you go play a game, but you're not really taking anything home with you afterwards. And I love that my hobby produces items that I can like keep with me and cherish and think about the time in my life when I was making them every time I look at that finished object. So I think that's a really nice strategy to incorporate into therapy. I think that that's amazing. This other Redditor says, my mom taught me how to knit, and for years I had this lovely story that her mom taught her how to knit, and her mom taught her how to knit, etc. She mentioned this to her mom once, and then she looked at her funny and said, "What? My mom hated all that stuff. I learned how to knit from a book." So that was great. That reminds me a little bit of one of my aunts who I could totally see saying something like that. Okay, so here we have another knitting community story. This person says, I grew up surrounded mostly by women. Great, I hear you all say. Well, they started to teach me how to knit at an early age. It would have been fine if there were only one or two of them, but as soon as one of them taught me anything, there would be cries of, what are you teaching her that for? And don't teach her that. She's not ready for that yet. This went on for several lessons, and then I burst into tears of frustration. My mom was told to take me to a yarn shop to pick out a pattern for me and some yarn that I would actually like. They portioned up the patterns so that those who were good at color work or whatever would do those bits with me. So I actually learned, but my goodness, those women were sticklers. I think a baby cardigan took me 6 months. At the end of it, though, I was knitting, pulling, frogging, and learning new stitches. Thank you, ladies. You taught me well. That is so sweet. I want just every knitting story to be about how people are coming together and teaching each other and taking away these memories together and like putting them into their work. I just think that that's so amazing. Oh, this one is good. This person says, I learned how to crochet and then knit because I wanted to do a Where's Waldo themed party. I started making red and white hats with various patterns and gradually got happier with each until I finally made one that I loved. The other about 20, which were varying levels of horror shows, were given to my friends who came. Several of my friends still have those older hats, but I still make them nicer ones. That is such a fun birthday party idea, first of all. And then to have made all of those hats for your friends, I mean, that must have taken like weeks to do. So I'm very impressed with this Redditor. That is a lot of commitment for a birthday party. And I would love a crappy hat made by one of my friends. I think that's amazing. I would cherish it forever. It would have like a spot of honor on my bookshelf. Absolutely. All right, so this week's Controlled Chaos segment is going to be a simple tip, but it's really effective, so I highly recommend. This week we're going to talk about needle stoppers. So I've got some here. These are little ghosties. I just think they're very cute. I find that needle stoppers are a really fun way to just add some like fun into your design. Obviously it doesn't make it into a part of the full sweater, but I just think it's kind of a fun little like marker for your project. So typically if you find them at a craft store or somewhere like that, they'll almost look like little tiny traffic cones, and you'll just stick them onto the edge of your needle. So basically all it does is it stops your stitches from having an opportunity to fall off of your needles and drop. I don't think when I was a beginner knitter, I thought about needle stoppers at all. And even as a more experienced knitter, a lot of times I just won't think of it anymore because I'll slide my stitches to the end of my needles, and then a lot of times, as long as it's not too close, they won't fall off of the needles, which is good. But I also find myself accidentally digging my needles into a different part of my sweater and then pulling up stitches, which is obviously not good. Another issue that I have sometimes is I will just grab my sweater from whatever angle to try to pull it into my lap or wherever I'm trying to work on it. And then all of a sudden, it was fine then, but I pulled it and now I am dropping half my stitches. So I think that this is just kind of a good like knitting hygiene item to make sure that you're implementing, especially if you're working on a big project. Because nothing is worse than spending so much time on your work and then having to spend 20 minutes picking up all your stitches again, or God forbid you accidentally frog part of your project. So highly recommend picking up some needle stoppers. I really like shopping Fangirl fibers for these, and Etsy also has some really good options for needle stoppers as well. So highly recommend picking up a little pair of needle stoppers and using those to make sure your projects are staying exactly where they're supposed to, which is on your needles. So our final segment here is the Queen of Cozy, where we all get an update on what my sweet little angel dog Millie has been up to this week. So this week was a lot less eventful than last week. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely check out last week's video where we talk about how I had to suspend her from the air in order to cut her nails. But we got it done. That was great. It was chaotic, it was a mess, but we got it done. This week, Millie had a little bit of chaos because I did a really horrible, terrible thing to her. I gave her a bath. I know. I shouldn't even like be here talking about this right now. I should be in a corner in shame, but I gave my child a bath. She hasn't had one in a while, and listen, she needed it. So I put her in the bathtub. I have to like physically haul her into the bathtub because she's not a willing participant here either. Not nearly as bad as it is with the nails. She just looks at me miserably the whole time, like I'm basically torturing her. But she doesn't really freak out too much. She just acts miserable, like I'm basically waterboarding her the entire time. That being said, we took a bath. We used some blueberry shampoo. She smells lovely. She got a brush afterwards. Things are good. So, unfortunately, I did torture my child by giving her a bath this week, but somehow she managed to survive. Other than that, it's been a pretty uneventful week, I would say, for the Queen of Cozy. Mostly she was just out here being cozy and being cute. So I spent a lot of time working on my halibut sweater this week, and she spent a lot of time on the couch with me, staring deep into my eyes and making sure I was getting that stitch count right every time. And we will go ahead and make sure to update with some more cozy behavior next week. If you're still watching right now, you are a real one, and I appreciate you so much for helping me grow this channel. If you haven't already, if you could click that subscribe button, that helps me a lot with growing my channel, and I would appreciate it if you could potentially leave a comment or even send this to somebody who you think might enjoy. With all that being said, I hope you have an awesome week. Thank you for being here, and I will see you guys next time on the Cozy Chaos podcast. Bye!